Oh, I see we now have Chairman Solomon, you're on?
Yes, I am on.
Okay. All right, you've got Bill 5053.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This bill would direct the Department of Transportation, in conjunction with the Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority, to erect barriers or netting on the Mount Hope Bridge, the Claiborne Pell Bridge, and the Jamestown Verrazano Bridge by January 1st, 2023. Too many people have taken their lives on those bridges in the last decade. Due to technological advances, there are various types of barriers and netting available to increase safety without hindering access for routine inspection and maintenance of the bridges. The Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority has suicide prevention measures in place, including a smart surveillance system allowing authorities to act quickly, but virtually no way to deter a determined jumper. The Rhode Island Samaritans also have signs posted at the bridge entrances with information for those contemplating suicide, and that has been very helpful. But I truly believe we need to go a step further in placing barriers or netting on those bridges. It's not only a serious problem, but an alarmingly frequent one. In 2019 alone, the Portsmouth police responded to the Mount Hope Bridge 36 times. And the cost of suicide goes far beyond the individual. It affects friends, families, first responders, and healthcare professionals. If this legislation passes, Rhode Island would join other states such as New York, California, and Florida who are moving forward with similar safety barrier plans. Now, I know obviously there is a cost to implementing the netting and the barriers on the bridges. And sometimes, as you'll hear from some of the people afterward, they'll talk about the Golden Gate Bridge, which is exceptionally expensive. However, when you look at other projects, just because San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge do it one way, doesn't necessarily mean it's the right way or the most cost-effective way. If you look at other states, such as in Florida, the Sunshine Skyway Bridge, which, according to the statistics I looked up, is 21,000. The length of it is 21,859 feet, whereas the Newport Pell Bridge is 11,247 feet. The cost for that project to put the barriers up over there, the netting, is between $3 and $3.5 million. So nowhere near, nowhere near what the Golden Gate Bridge cost would be. So when you look at this bill, I do request that the committee looked at, there are other alternatives, that we need to look at other alternatives that compared to what the Golden Gate Bridge does in assessing the cost. And there are other alternatives available that provide netting and safety barriers at a much lower cost. Now, the reason why, one of the reasons why I introduced this bill is that back in 2019, lost a friend of mine on the Newport Pell Bridge. It was unfortunate, and he was going through some issues at the time. But the thing is, I was just amazed that there really are no barriers on those bridges. I mean, if you just, when you're driving across, it actually amazed me as to how low those barriers are currently. And by implementing netting or barriers, it would definitely give people, definitely give the authorities, the Turnpike and Bridge Authority, the police, enough time to get to that person so as to get them the assistance that they need and to get through whatever is going on in their lives. Now, you've received a bunch of written testimony today. You're going to hear from some great speakers today, but you've received some written testimony from many people who have been affected by such tragedies, by suicides of loved ones, friends, etc. And I encourage the committee to go through each and every one of those letters individually and read them, and to hear everybody's individual story as to how this legislation would positively affect. Although we can't change it for someone in the past, if we could prevent someone from taking their life in the future, I really think it would be a great thing that we could do and something positive. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to say that we do have, when we do have written testimony, it is all on our website here at the State House for the finance operations. So we do on a lot of these bills have people who have written testimony for that. We have them all, and we'll help you find them if need be. But they do exist. They're there, and we take those very seriously as we do the actual testimony of people who will testify by voice. But thank you, Chairman Solomon. Is anybody on the panel having a question for him? Rep. Barrows, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Solomon, I appreciate your testimony and your sincerity in telling us your story about your friend. Chairman, so in the process of drafting this legislation, did you get to talk to the folks at DOT and the Turnpike? Are they in favor of doing this? Or, I mean, what was the discussion like?
So I've had some great discussions with members over at the DOT and the Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority, and they understand the importance of preventing suicide on the bridges. Obviously, one of their concerns is is the cost, but seeing with the likely transportation funding that's going to come down from the federal government, I think this is a perfect opportunity to both upgrade our bridges and also provide safety for those bridges too. So I wouldn't say that anyone is against this bill. I just think it's a matter of the process of getting from where we are now to actually putting those barriers up. So, I definitely think that I definitely think it's feasible. What I will say is I know that the legislation that I put in requires the barriers to be placed in January 1st, 2023. However, I would very much be open to staggering deadlines per bridge. Obviously, I understand that not all 3 bridges can be done within a 2-year period, but if the committee were to stagger the dates for completion, I would definitely be very open to that.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from anyone here, or are there questions from those of you who may be at home on that in terms of the members? Okay. I believe we do have. I'm sorry, Rep. Ruggiero, please.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. And thank you, Chairman Solomon, for putting this in. Obviously, I co-sponsored it, and I really appreciate what you've done. I'm sorry about the loss of your friend. And perhaps we'll hear from some people to testify about this. I agree with you that a bridge can be a moment of opportunity if someone is suffering from depression. Are there any studies on the safety and the integrity of a bridge when it comes to, aerodynamics and wind, putting some kind of a netting on it? Do we hear testimony on that?
I believe the Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority is available for questions. We have had discussions on that, and obviously aerodynamics and weight are something to consider. So there would have to be engineering that would take place to implement it. So we're not at that point yet, but I'm hoping that a bill such as this will get that process going to see what alternatives are possible, whether it be a barrier, whether it just be simple netting. And those would be different things that would explore that in the case that, whether a bridge could take the weight. Also,
and they're certainly capable of that. I know when I saw the barrier, they certainly put that up back in 2014 to, Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on that? Okay, I think we have, do we have someone online right now? Okay. This is Carrie Graves.
Yes,
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not too bad. You're on, please.
Okay, thank you. Hello, thank you. Good afternoon, House of Representatives, distinguished guests, and concerned citizens. My name is Carrie Gray, and today I'm here to talk about my Aunt Joan. Joan Richardson, born May 5th, 1951, was the only aunt I knew growing up. She was my mom's sister, the youngest of 4 siblings who grew up together on Walcott Street in Newport. Aunt Joan relied on the strength of those around her. She had many phobias that carried throughout her short life. Her diagnosis was manic depressive, known today as bipolar disorder. Aunt Joan was not only afraid of her own shadow, but she was terrified of the ocean water that she grew up just a stone's throw away from. She struggled medically, socially, and psychologically. In her bad days, she harmed herself by reopening old sutures, purposely causing infections to gain attention from doctors and family. In her good days, she enjoyed playing games like Old Maid and Rummy. She avidly collected clowns and Avons, and she loved to spoil her niece and her nephews. But this story isn't about her life, unfortunately. This story is about December 19th, 1991. The story is about her death, her suicide, and how it could have been prevented. This story is about how her suicide affected the 9-year-old child I was then and continues to affect my life in ways now. In 1991, Aunt Joan had a particularly difficult year. She pushed away those close to her, and she fell into a deep depression. She longed for her mother, who she had lost just a few years earlier. Aunt Joan didn't visit the gravesite often in Middletown, where both of her parents are laid to rest. But on that snowy-covered day of December 19th, 1991, she decided to make the drive to the island. However, she never made it that far. No one knows for sure what thoughts were going through her head that day, or if she had a predetermined plan prior to reaching the bridge. What we do know for certain is that from Bristol, she pulled onto Mount Hope, and as she approached the top of the bridge, she put her car in park. As a passerby noticed, she began to exit her car. This Good Samaritan informed the toll booth workers. One of the officials began to drive up the bridge and witnessed Aunt Joan go over the edge without hesitation. She fell 110 feet to the cold, crashing salt water below, and while in the air, she lost consciousness. Because of this, when she hit the water, it crushed nearly every bone in her body. But this wasn't the cause of her death. She suffered even further as water was found in her lungs, and officially, she drowned. When I came home from elementary school that day, I was greeted at the door by both of my parents, and I knew something was wrong. My mom was crying and made me sit down next to her. I had never experienced a death before, and my mom struggled trying to explain to her innocent 9-year-old daughter what death meant, what suicide meant, and how I would never see my Aunt Joan again. I couldn't understand how she fell off the bridge, because surely she didn't want to die, right? I blamed myself. There must have been something I could have done, but I should have seen. The guilt ate at me from the inside, haunting my dreams, and in time manifested as my own suicidal thoughts. I had nightmares of her jumping, replaying over and over and over in my head. How did she look while falling? Was she tumbling, or did she just fall straight down? Did she hit the water on her back, or did she belly flop into the waves? And in my nightmares, she would stop at the top before jumping, just to point at me and tell me that it was all my fault. I carried this pain and guilt for years. As a teenager, I was put into therapy for my self-harming acts. I was cutting myself, starving myself even, due to the emotional pain. A part of me wanted to die, to end the pain that I was feeling. It wasn't until years of therapy and 2 trips to a hospital in Boston that I finally realized how much her suicide had affected me, changed me, depressed me. I finally found the strength at 14, 5 years after her death, to see myself worthy of living. I realized that if my suicide would cause harm to another life, that I couldn't do it. Even if I could only count my plants, someone needed to water it. And I stand here today, and I can honestly say that I did find my strength. that I would never intentionally hurt myself again or plan to kill myself. Yet, I continue to be affected by her suicide, and I fight for my own strength. Just last year, I started therapy called EMDR to help alleviate my PTSD symptoms, specifically related to her suicide. And for the first time in my life, I know and I believe that her suicide was not my fault. Unfortunately, my mom didn't see the same logic as I did. She fought her own and different battles. However, when my mom was contemplating suicide, one of her responses was that, quote, "Joan did it to be with my mom. Why can't I do it to be with my dad?" End quote. And continued on by saying the girl who was afraid of her shadow, let alone of water, went through with it, so why couldn't she? Although my mom did not use a bridge, I do believe her suicide in 2000 was influenced by the pain and guilt that she carried for her sister. My Uncle Roy, Aunt Joan's oldest brother, had also blamed himself. Following the news of Joan's suicide, the anger he felt towards himself resulted in him breaking both of his hands. Before his death in 2000, he couldn't speak of his sister without talking about this guilt through his tears. I'm here today to give my Aunt Joan a voice, to give my pain and guilt a voice. Safety barriers would have and should have saved her life. My aunt was scared of the water, afraid of drowning her whole life. Although Aunt Joan had threatened suicide at times, those closest to her knew that it was a cry for help. If there had been a barrier in place, forcing her to hesitate, forcing her to think of her actions in reality, she never would have followed through by jumping over the edge to be submerged by one of her lifelong fears. Suicide by bridge jumping has been more lethal than any other type of suicide. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem, crisis, or pain. Studies have shown survivors immediate regret, finding that in any given year, 95 to 100% of those that survive realize the moment they jumped they made a mistake. In one example, all 29 participants regretted that they had jumped. Another study of 515 people that survived had regretted jumping, of which 7 went on to take their lives. Stephen Miller, district bridge manager at the Golden Gate Bridge, has stated that the barrier is meant to be as much a mental deterrent as a physical one. Dr. John Draper, director at the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, declares that by reducing the access to lethal means, the bridge barriers are the optimal means for preventing suicide. And in support of his claim, in 2013, researchers in Australia analyzed 9 studies across the world. The effectiveness of suicide barriers, they had concluded that there was a reduction of suicide cases by 86%. These barriers do save lives. They save heartache. They save 9-year-olds and 38-year-olds and everyone affected by suicide from a lifelong battle of guilt. December 19th, 1991 didn't have to be the day I learned about death, about suicide. It didn't have to be the day I started to carry guilt and blame myself. Joan Richardson was only 40 years old when she jumped off Mount Hope Bridge. She had a whole life ahead of her still, but in her darkest moments, what she needed was a hesitation, a comeback to reality, something to tell her not to. The safety barriers would have done just that. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Carrie. I can't think of anybody who's stronger than you are and what you've gone through and your advocacy for this. So a heartfelt thank you from everybody on our committee for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay. We have Melissa up next. Okay. Melissa?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, this is Chairman Evans. How are you doing this afternoon?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, we're ready for your testimony, please.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Melissa Cotta. I'm here today to talk about the safety barriers on our bridges. Many people were not able to be here today, so there were family members of those who jumped from our unprotected bridges, other witnesses to suicide on our bridges, and first responders. So today, I would like to share my story of witnessing a bridge jump from the Mount Hope, just to give you an idea of what someone experiences when they go through this, what they witness, and to give you an idea of what some of these loved ones are experiencing when they lose someone that they love so dearly from jumping off these bridges. So I thank you for your attention over the next 4 minutes. Today, I'm here to share my story about a day in 2016 on the Mount Hope Bridge. I was driving back to Portsmouth with a friend and my dog. As we approached the bridge, traffic was backed up and moving slowly. I couldn't see what was causing the delay until we got closer to the center span. The vehicles in front of me and those coming into Bristol took turns driving around a parked car. I saw a man in the driver's seat, so I stopped to help. This inadvertently stopped traffic long enough for him to open his door and exit the vehicle. I quickly realized this man was not having car troubles. He was there to jump off the bridge. The wind chill temperature was below zero that day. It was extremely windy. My car rocked back and forth, while the man struggled to remain standing with each gust of wind. He worked his way to the back of his vehicle. I used my horn to get his attention. He turned toward me, and our eyes met. I could see the pain in his eyes. I started to talk to him through my windshield. The glazed-over expression on his face started to dissipate as he tried to figure out if he knew who I was and what I was saying to him. However, the distraction was temporary. His eyes left mine, and he started to make his way to the railing. I opened my door to get out. I wanted to maintain eye contact and keep talking with him. The wind was so strong, I decided to stay in the car. I hit my horn a couple more times and asked my friend to open his window so I could talk to the man again. At this point, he was squatting on top of the bridge railing while holding on to the tower cable with his right hand. My friend opened his door to get out. He was trying to grab the man off the railing, is what he was saying in his mind, and he hadn't even left my car yet. But that was what his intention was. I remember touching my friend's arm and asking him to please stay in the car because it was too dangerous with the wind, possible ice, and no safety harness to guard against being pulled over the rail from the momentum of someone going over. My friend closed his door and remained in the vehicle. The man was staring down at the water. I yelled out to him from the open window. He turned and looked into my eyes again. I asked him to please get down off the railing. He said something to me that I couldn't hear and shook his head no. Still in his squatting position, he turned his head and body back towards the water, let go of the tower cable, and pushed off the railing. My eyes shifted from the empty railing to my friend. I asked if he was okay. When he finally spoke, he said, "I messed up because I should have let him out of the car." He was in shock. I called 911 and we remained on top of the bridge for another hour or so, speaking with the police and filling out an incident report. My friend and I didn't speak or see each other for weeks following this day. We have never really talked about it with one another, and several months after the jump, he told me that I probably saved his life because I stopped him from getting out of the car. He said he had often thought how easily he could have been pulled over. After the jump, I spent several months searching for answers and solace. I questioned every action and non-action I made that day. I felt guilt and sadness. I went over so many times the what if, should have, and could have in my mind. I began publicly speaking about my experiences. I read statistically significant research on bridge suicide. I talked to as many people as I could about the prevalence of suicide by bridge in our community. The more I talked about it, the more people who came forward that knew someone or had someone who died jumping off from one of our state bridges. I soon discovered that suicide from Rhode Island bridges happens far more often than what gets reported. After hearing an overwhelming number of people who courageously shared stories of losing loved ones to bridge suicide and wanted something done to make our bridges safe, I co-founded a coalition called Bridging the Gap for Safety and Healing. We are dedicated to advocating for the installation of safety barriers on Rhode Island bridges, raising awareness of suicide by bridge, suicide prevention, and supporting all survivors that lost loved ones to suicide. Family members, loved ones, witnesses, first responders, and ultimately our entire community. This man's death could have been prevented. The death of countless people could have been prevented. Safety barriers eliminate easy access to a highly lethal means. Safety barriers do exactly what they're meant to do. They save lives. I encourage the members of the House to review all submitted written testimony. I request your full consideration and support by voting to pass House Bill number 5053. Thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Melissa, for your heartfelt testimony. You certainly sound like you're doing a great thing by advocating for this and the foundation that you started. You've helped a lot of people today, and we appreciate that. Keep up the good work, please.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we got Brian. Hi, Brian. You on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Good. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you for having us. Before I begin my comments, I would like to extend my condolences to everyone who has lost a loved one to these unprotected bridges. Our hearts go out to you as we honor the lives of your loved ones by making Rhode Island's bridges, the Mount Hope, the Pell, and the Jamestown bridges safer through the installation of suicide prevention barriers. We owe this to them. My name is Brian Ganley. I am co-founder of Bridging the Gap for Safety and Healing, along with Tiverton resident Melissa Carter, who you just talked to. We formed our coalition in 2016. Melissa contacted me after witnessing a suicide from the Mount Hope Bridge. Our volunteer mission is to see suicide prevention barriers on the state's 3 major bridges that cross Narragansett Bay and to offer support and healing to those who have lost a loved one to these unprotected bridges. I have been a suicide prevention volunteer since 1981 when I became a volunteer for the Samaritans of Rhode Island. Since that time, in addition to serving as crisis hotline listening line volunteer, I have been involved in the many programs, the agency's Lifeline at the ACI, our Safe Place Survivors Group. I'm also currently a member of the board of directors. In the late 1980s, I was fortunate to have served as a member of the Braga Bridge Task Force, resulting in Senator Tom Norton and Representative Joan Menard sponsoring legislation that ultimately resulted in the installation of barriers on the Braga Bridge. I myself have lost many friends and family to suicide, and including suicide from these bridges that have a 4-foot-nothing rail. With my Samaritans training, I've befriended people in crisis who were on their way to the bridges and who were on the bridges threatening to jump. Unfortunately, at the Samaritans, we see the pain and devastation for the loved ones left behind to pick up the pieces, their grief shared at our support group. Many suicides can't be predicted or prevented, but suicides from our bridges is something we can predict and actively prevent with the installation of suicide prevention barriers on our state's 3 major bridges. As a hotline volunteer, we are trained to first remove the means of suicide. Access to those bridges in the absence of barriers is a means of suicide. A bridge with a 135-foot drop and a minimum of a 3-foot rail is like handing a suicidal person a loaded gun. These bridges are all loaded guns, so we need to take away that gun. As a union construction worker, OSHA 30 certified, safety is first on my job as it is on the bridges. I am not allowed within 6 feet of a potential fall hazard of 12 feet or more without wearing an approved safety harness. The Mount Hope Bridge railing, which is 35 inches, the Pell Bridge being at 42 inches. These iconic structures promote the beauty of the state, but the state is providing the means for suicide. The architects of our bridges did not consider the suicidal in their designs. The times have changed and safety of the public should be first priority. It is time to fix what the architects missed. Those are barriers. Studies have shown that barriers are the most effective means of suicide prevention. Signage and telephones are a supplement to those barriers. Studies also indicate that potential jumpers do not seek out alternate locations. Today, I am asking you to support this life-saving legislation to install suicide prevention barriers on the Mount Hope, the Pell, and the Jamestown-Verrazano bridges, not only to prevent future suicides, but also to give closure to all the families who have lost loved ones to these bridges. Our state motto is hope. It is time to make hope a reality and suicide from Rhode Island's bridges a thing of the past. Respectfully submitted, Brian Ganley. I want to thank you all for your time, and please read the witnesses and the impacts that have been mailed into you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Brian, for your heartfelt testimony and all that you still continue to do. This is terrible, but we've had, including yourself, 2 other strong people let the world know that there are people who do care about that. So thank you, Brian, for your attention to this matter. We have Denise coming up next. Denise, how are you?
Yes. Good, thank you.
Good. Okay, you're on, Denise.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Denise Panichis, and I'm the Executive Director of the Samaritans of Rhode Island. I'd also like to acknowledge Representative Barros. We are located in Pawtucket, and he has been a strong supporter, as you have been a supporter of the Samaritans. And today I'd like to acknowledge Representative Solomon, who has stepped up in a way that, in my memory, I don't remember any other legislator stepping up to talk about this very subject. And so I would like to acknowledge what he is doing in the history of suicide prevention. The other speakers have painted a picture, and I'm going to try very hard not to repeat what they said, but I think one of the things that has happened is that we put suicide prevention in a box, and you think about the suicidal, but clearly what you are hearing today is the impact on everyone else. And I've been at the Samaritans for 20 years, and we established our grief support group in 1981, where we have befriended those who have lost loved ones to the bridges. On our hotline, as Brian just said, we befriend those people who are contemplating jumps from the bridges. At the Samaritans, we know people who have lost loved ones to the bridges. We know people who have survived bridge jumps. We know people who have witnessed jumps, as you have just heard. We know people who have hung on to potential bridge jumpers in hopes that they don't fall into the water. We know people who have washed ashore when they have been recovered. We know people who have been at the docks as those bodies have been brought to the shore. After this hearing, when everyone goes home, Samaritan volunteers continue to be part of a community of people who live with the aftermath of not having barriers on the bridges. As Representative Solomon said, the upcoming federal COVID-19 economic development stimulus money is for roads and bridges. I want it to be understood it cannot be diverted to mental health treatment. So suicide prevention barriers should be part of every RIDOT and Rhode Island Turnpike and Bridge Authority work plan. You know, one of the things we know is that we are often cited as a state that isn't the last in many things, but it does not have to be that way. We can be the first when it comes to innovation and design and cost-effective solutions for bridge barriers. We have the talent in the state to do it. But we must bring a sense of urgency that matches the timetable proposed by Representative Solomon because one more suicide is one suicide too many. So today, as you contemplate this legislation, I ask that you give a chance to this legislation to change the destiny of not only the hopeless and alone, but everyone who lives in their world. I've also included in my written testimony a suicide emergency checklist brochure that we did for the shoreline and island communities. I hope that all of the legislators will look at that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Denise. We really appreciate your testimony on this. All the testimony combined has given us a bigger picture of what we have to deal with. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, sir.
What I'm going to do now is read for the record. I think we have 15 individuals who did give written testimony. And please excuse me if I get your name wrong, but I'll try to get it right. Brian Ganley, all of these are in favor. Daryl Velez, Jacob Breyer, you had two, it looks like. Jennifer Matoni, Joseph Matoni, Catherine Plismesser, Kerry Gray, Lauren Weinstock, Lexi Hanschel, Maura Mulligan, Melissa Ames, Melissa Cotter, and this has to stand for the Mental Health Association of Rhode Island, Michael Mello, and those were the ones who were absolutely in favor of the bill. So I wanted to make sure that that's on the record. But again, if you go to the website, you'll see all of the written testimony there. So we appreciate that. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions on this particular bill that we have before us now? We have some great testimony, and we've got a lot to work with. If not, thank you very much for all of the time that you took to make us aware of something that's in our backyard that we can do some things with. Okay, so if not, then that'll end the testimony on this particular bill, which is 5053. I see now we have Chairman Craven who has arrived back. Oh, and before I do that, I'd like to make sure that anybody else that's out there that did not get a chance to vote on being here or on the holding all bills for further study, please send me a text like Chairman Slater did to make sure that your voice is heard. Okay.